Accepting a check can be hazardous to your financial health. I'm Dan Ringer, and we'll talk about fake checks right now on The Law Works.
From West Virginia Public Broadcasting.
The Law Works is made possible by the generous support of the West Virginia State Bar, the Monongalia County Bar Association, and by a major grant from the West Virginia Bar Foundation, promoting public knowledge of the law in West Virginia. The West Virginia Bar Foundation, the philanthropic organization for West Virginia's legal profession and justice system.
Once upon a time, everyone paid for nearly everything with a check. Now, accepting checks may or may not be a good idea. My guests are West Virginia Deputy Attorney General Jill Miles and Derek Walker, the Chief Investigator with the Attorney General's Office. Jill, Derek, welcome back.
Thank you.
Fake checks. I thought a check was a check was a check. They're not. We're not talking about forged signatures.
We're talking about when you might happen to go out to your mailbox and you open up a letter and it says, "You've just won the lottery." Catch is, you didn't enter the lottery. Or, you know, people from Canada are sending these fake checks with letters indicating that you've won the Canadian International Lottery. They want you to go out and cash the check. The check's in advance for your winnings. This is to pay for the taxes and for the fees to get the money across the border. The catch is, when you cash the check to claim your prize and you wire that money, a few weeks later your bank calls you and says the check was fake. It's completely forged.
Okay, so this is a variation on a scheme that I've seen in the past where somebody says, we have a lot of money for you. All you have to do is send us a little bit of money so that we can go through whatever the hassle is of getting your money to you.
Right.
And they do it by using checks. How does this work? What happens?
You know, Dan, one of the best stories, let me use an example of what happened to a West Virginian a few years ago. The gentleman's name was Earl Walls. Earl lived in Lincoln County. He grew up in Logan County. He was one of 10 children. His father was a coal miner. His father was killed. They had to move to Lincoln County. His mom told him, "Look, Earl, if they have different books here, you're going to have to quit school." He quit school, worked in a corrugated box factory for 24 years, basically was living on nothing. At one point, he started to get on the internet and look for work on the internet. And he got an email from Jack Russell's gallery, art gallery. Then he got an instant message. There was a link to the email to the gallery. He went to the gallery. It looked legitimate. He started getting more messages. The guy told him, "Look, Earl, I've got this art gallery in London. I'm having trouble when people pay me with a check, or a traveler's check, or a certified check. It takes a long time for me to get paid. So why don't I go ahead and send the checks to you, and if you'll cash them, and then wire the money back to me, you can keep 10%. Earl said, "Fine, I'll do that." Within a few weeks, he got $3,000 worth of American Express traveler's checks. Took him down to the bank that he'd been going to for years.
They knew him.
They knew him. All he made was Social Security, cashed the checks, went to the grocery store that he was instructed to go to, took out his 10%, wired the money to Nigeria. A couple weeks later, he gets $9,500 worth of checks, American Express traveler's checks. Goes back to his bank. This time, things didn't work out the way he planned. The teller went back, told him that the checks had been counterfeit, called the police. The police came into his local bank in Wayne County, arrested him, took him down to the magistrate office, charged him with counterfeiting, charged him $15,000 bail. He told him exactly what had happened. He said, "Look, I'm a victim. I was on the internet. I wired this money to Nigeria, and there are more checks at my home." They went and got the checks, and the next thing you know, he's been charged with a crime. Fortunately for Earl, he had a neighbor. The neighbor went on the website, found our press releases about the fake checks,
Went to the Attorney General's
went to
website.
the Attorney General's website, found our press releases about fake checks, because quite frankly, Dan, this happens every day of the week. People are getting fake checks. We got involved, Derek got involved, and we immediately knew that it was a problem. Why don't you tell some of the tips, Derek, some of the red flags?
Let's go back in this
Okay.
story. Was there a real art gallery?
There absolutely was a real art
So
gallery.
when he would have checked out the art gallery, he would have found that it really did exist in London.
Right. I mean, we actually went to the website, and there is really a Jack Russell art gallery.
But he wasn't communicating with Jack Russell or
Right.
anybody for that.
I think, didn't we go to Jack Russell's website, and
Yes.
he actually had posted
Warnings.
a warning
Yep.
that there was a problem. So everything rang true to Earl, you know? I mean, and he was a poor guy.
Derek, what are the red flags in all this? What should have alerted him that all was not as it seemed?
In this specific case, they sent Mr. Walls American Express traveler's checks in $500 denominations. American Express has things posted on their website that warns both banks and consumers that anything over $100 on an American Express traveler's check has to be special ordered. With that special order, they actually, there's an issuing bank. In this case, these counterfeit traveler's checks had the logo of HSBC Bank.
It's a real bank.
It's a real bank, exactly. The thing is, there's no branches in West Virginia, and there's no branches over across the border in Kentucky. So nowhere nearby are there any HSBC branches where Earl could have special ordered these traveler's checks from. And he went to his local bank to cash them, you know, indicating that they were his. So, you know, one of the red flags to the bank could have been, well, he's our customer, and he's bringing us special order traveler's checks that are drawn on another bank.
Right. You know, in addition to that, Earl had been a customer at this bank for years. Earl made $1,100 in Social Security. When Earl walked into that bank with $3,000 worth of traveler's checks, you know, if somebody had taken a little bit of time, maybe asked him a few questions. Earl, where'd you get the money? Oh, well, I got it from somebody I met online. What are you going to do with the money, Earl? I'm going to wire the money to Nigeria. Why are you going to do that, Earl? I mean, if somebody...
Well, in all honesty, I didn't know that American Express traveler's checks had to be special ordered if they were going to be more than $100. One. Two, it may have been special ordered. Somebody sent it to me. I would accept that. Three, if I had gone to my local bank, I would not expect them to demand of me, how did I get this? What am I going to do with it? Because it's just a bank. I just want to put it in the bank so that I can write a check and send it to somebody. So while those are things that as attorneys or as an investigator for the Attorney General might clue us into the idea that something's not quite right here, I can see an awful lot of ordinary folk accepting that. The biggest red flag up to this point in all of that is that it happened. I mean,
Right.
who just falls out of the heavens and says, we'll give you $950 if you will go cash $9,500 worth of checks? What are other flags are involved in all this?
You have to watch out when someone's asking you for money in advance for anything. In the case that I mentioned at the beginning with the lottery scam, where the check comes in the mail. Or in Earl's case, where it was a work-at-home scheme, where they sent him the American Express traveler's checks. We're also seeing a rash of folks getting letters in the mail claiming to be from mystery shoppers networks. They want you to go to your local store and first go to your bank and cash a check that they've sent you as an advance to do some shopping at a store, and then the remainder of that check they want you to wire it back to them. The biggest red flag is that wire transfer. When someone wants to give you money for nothing, but then in return you're required to use a commercial wire transfer service to wire the money back to them, that's the biggest red flag that there is.
Why is that a red flag? What is there about wire transfers that make them better for the scurrilous SOB than just sending them a check or a cashier's check?
That wire transfer, when it leaves the country, which these crooks are picking things up outside of the United States, the security and the consumer protections with that wire transfer is equal to you taking a wad of cash, putting it in an envelope, and dropping it in a mailbox.
Right. Derek, what is it when you actually wire money? Let's say I'm taking it and I'm thinking I'm wiring it to Toronto. Once I send it to Canada, it can be picked up anywhere in the country of Canada.
Correct.
Through their national banking system?
No, through the commercial wire transfer system.
So
There's
they're
very little
using-
regulation in that market.
They're using something like Western Union to effect wire transfers.
Correct.
So I send it to Ontario, somebody in Saskatoon
Can pick it up.
with a Western Union office can pick it up.
And usually all they need is the money transfer control number and the name it was sent to. When it goes outside the country, the requirements to show positive ID and so forth don't necessarily exist.
So if I take a check into a branch of my local bank where they may not know me and I want to cash it, they'll ask me to endorse the check and they'll probably ask me for some sort of photo ID to prove that I am who I am. That does not happen with wire transfers necessarily.
Outside of the country, correct.
Outside of the country. And also, you can't say, well, he was in Kanawha City at a bank and cash this check because Western Union doesn't care where you are to take the money out. You can be in Saskatoon or Moose Jaw or Ottawa.
Right.
And so you can't physically trace the person very readily.
Right.
Okay, well, how do you protect yourself?
Well, I think one of the things you do is you pay attention to what we're telling you right now. As I mentioned to you earlier, there is not a day that I don't hear the receptionist out in the office say at least 5 times, throw it away. It's a fake check. This is a big scam, and it is growing bigger and bigger. And the reason it's growing bigger and bigger is because it works, because people fall for it. So if you get a check in the mail from somebody that you don't know, before you go to the bank and cash it, because by the way, once you cash it and spend the money, the bank is going to come after you to get the money back. If it's a counterfeit check or a fake check, call us up and we will tell you it's a fake check. 9 times out of 10, if it's from somebody you don't know and you have no reason why you got it, don't go to the bank and cash it.
A variation on this scam that I have seen, usually operating through the online bid services, auction services like eBay, is the citizen will offer to sell something on eBay, a piece of ceramics or a piece of stereo gear or a camera or something, and they'll get a huge bid, much more than it should be for the item, from somebody out of the United States, or conceivably could be in the United States. But that person will say, okay, I'm not going to send you payment for the item. There's a guy there 2 states away or somewhere in the United States that owes me a large sum of money. I'm going to have him send the money that he owes me to you. You deduct the amount of the money that I'm supposed to pay you for that item and send me the balance in Nigeria or wherever it may be. Nigeria has become synonymous with scams. I'm not sure exactly how it came about, but it has come about because it seems so many of them generate from there. And the way you receive the payment from the person in the United States is in some sort of non-bank check, or maybe even something that looks like a bank check, but it's not the way we would typically receive payment. So it would go into the bank. They would give you your cash back or the balance back, and then later on you get a call that says that check that you deposited, that money order, that transfer, whatever it was no good. Give us our usually thousands of dollars back. How long does it take to clear the banking system for these instruments?
The crooks have gotten very smart. Checks are processed every day by machinery. You go to the bank and they put it through a system, it goes through a computer. It's not really handled by a person. A good example is like in the case of Earl Walls. The traveler's check has the 9-digit routing number for the originating bank. They put a fake routing number on it. So when it went through the system kicked it for manual handling. When it has to be manually handled, it can take 14 to 21 days to make it through the banking system.
21 days, it's 3 weeks.
3 weeks.
You know, another thing they do, Dan, is they actually will say the check will come to somebody on the East Coast and the check is drawn allegedly on a bank in the West Coast. So it goes through the banking system, nobody reads it. All they're doing is reading those numbers on the bottom, which is the routing number. And by the time it finally gets to the place where somebody says, wait a minute, there's a problem, 3, 4, 5 days have passed.
We're talking about fake checks. My guests are West Virginia Deputy Attorney General Jill Miles and Derek Walker, the Chief Investigator with the West Virginia Attorney General's Office. I'm Dan Ringer, and this is The Law Works. I have also seen scams that will involve someone going into a non-bank, typically a grocery store or someplace like that, and cashing their payroll check. Mm-hmm. It is very difficult anymore for a merchant to identify just by sight that a check is good or not. How does that happen? Where do these checks, these fake payroll checks come from?
Typically, it goes back to what we were talking about with these scams where they send the checks to consumers and the consumer may not happen to have a bank account. With some of these, especially with the mystery shopping scams, the criminals are sophisticated enough, they're actually drawing the fake check on a legitimate business's account. We've seen that happen. So when they take it in to like the merchant and the consumer supplies like the check cashing service at the grocery store with their ID and so forth, and it goes through, the merchant has no way of knowing that it's fake, even if they would run it through the system, because it's drawn on a legitimate account. It's extremely complicated, is the best way to put it.
All you need is a laser printer and some good stock paper, and you can create your own checks. And if you have the routing number of a bank and a checking number that is a good check number, voila, you've got a check.
In fact,
right.
In my office, as in many small businesses, the business person may have a number of checking accounts. In a law office, for example, you'll have a trust account that's required by the West Virginia Supreme Court of Appeals. If you hold money for a client, you have to have a checking account. It's called IOTA, Interest on Lawyer Trust Accounts, an IOTA account. That's one. Then you have an operating account. That's just how you pay your office bills. That's two. You'll probably have your personal account. That's three. And you may have another account for incidentals of one form or another. So you can easily have 3 or 4 checking accounts. Buying bank printed checks or commercially printed checks for 4 or 3 accounts can be very expensive. So a number of small business people will buy proper check stock, proper toner for their laser printer, and they will print their own checks. And Jill, if you'll show me one of your blank checks, I would have 100% of the information I need to forge checks on your account.
Right.
So how do you protect yourself from this? I can tell you another scheme that I've run into. I had a client that had this happen to them. Somebody comes into their store, it was a grocery store, and bought a couple of dollars worth of groceries, chatted up the cashier on the way out, paid in cash, and left. A few days later, comes in, does essentially the same thing. Stays in this routine for a couple of weeks. By now, they've chatted up everybody, very nice, charismatic people. The store owner, who paid good attention to his business, had met them, they'd walked the aisles. He comes in one day and he says, hey, I got a job with Ford Motors or International Dynamics or something like that, and they've given me my first payroll check. I see that you cash payroll checks. Would you cash mine? He said, sure, we know you.
Right.
And they cash a check for maybe a couple, $3,000. A, that's the last time they ever see the people, and B, the check some 10 or 20 days later bounces. The account number was right, the name of the company was right, the logo on the check was right. the company had just never written that check.
Right. You know, that is one of the absolute things that they always do, is they try to establish a relationship. That happened with Earl Walls. He got the instant message from Jack Russell Art Gallery. That was the first one. But then there were many more. And Earl, if he was here today, he would tell you they developed a friendship. He became friends with this guy online. I mean, that is something they do. They try to be your friend.
People marry people they've met online.
Right. That's another one of the fake check scams,
Right.
is relationship scams.
The fake people scams, which is a little bit beyond what we're talking about here today. But I've spent a number of hours thinking about this over the years, and I just don't see any foolproof way that an individual or a small business can truly protect themselves from fake check schemes from someone who's serious about wanting to do it.
The consumer needs to be diligent. Your bank is required by law to send you your statements. Go over those statements with a fine-tooth comb and see if there's anything out of the ordinary, especially with consumers, or the crooks, I need to say, being able to go out to their local office supply store and make checks. You know, they're printing these fake checks on consumer accounts as well. So, you know, the consumer can protect themselves by, first of all, not cashing a check that comes from any kind of stranger, even if they think they've developed a relationship. And second, to make sure the crooks aren't passing checks off on your account, check your statements, be extremely diligent.
And be careful about to whom you give checks
Exactly,
also.
right.
And, you know, the little girl with the beret and the brownie costume comes to your door and says, here are your Girl Scout cookies. And you may not remember ordering them, so you grab your checkbook and you say, okay, here's a check. You've just given that little girl, who may or may not be a brownie or a Girl Scout, enough information that the person who sent her to your door, and this happens, can now raid your checking account by producing checks that look for all the world like yours. One of the horrible truths of the banking industry is that by and large, if you are negotiating checks of less than just a few $100s, no one ever looks at that check at the bank. They take it, they pop it into a scanner, scan it, and it's in the system, and then later on we'll find out about it. We're talking about fake checks. My guests are West Virginia Deputy Attorney General Jill Miles and Derek Walker, the Chief Investigator with the Attorney General's Office. I'm Dan Ringer, and this is The Law Works. Jill, we didn't mention, you are in the Consumer Protection Division at the Attorney General's Office, which is why you overhear phone calls with language like, throw the check away.
Right.
How many times does this happen?
Oh, it happens all the time. I mean, you know, and I think the best way to stop this scheme is to educate people. Because when people wire money, even on eBay, for example, we will get complaints. We take consumer complaints. And someone will come in, they'll read the complaint to me, they bought something over eBay, they were instructed to wire the money to somebody in Arizona to California. I can tell you right now, the chances of us ever finding that person or ever getting the individual their money back are nil. So most times I just say, close the file. We just can't do anything about it. It happens all the time. So the way to solve the problem, the way to take care of it, is for people to hold on to the check. Take it down to your bank, deposit it, and wait 2 weeks, 3 weeks. See what happens. Or call us up, send it to us. We'll look at it. We can look it up. You know, one of the interesting things about Earl's case, and something that I didn't realize, is that number that's at the bottom of your check is the bank's numerical routing number. Apparently, the first two numbers never go above 72. On these checks that Earl had, the number was 80. So that immediately was another red flag. Now, would Earl have known that? No.
I wouldn't have known that.
I didn't know that until we started looking into this.
Started looking into it.
The other way to avoid incidents with checks are, if you're doing business online, use a credit card, not a debit card. Use a credit card, because there are protections with credit cards. Use a payment escrow service. PayPal does not, for example, claim to be an escrow service, but they are a payment intermediary, and you do have some recourse with them. Right. Checks are kind of an old-fashioned technology.
Right. You know, it's interesting you mentioned that, Dan, because actually Derek and I are up here for another reason, and we're going to give an internet quiz. And I'm going to give a preview here. One of the first questions we ask is, when buying something over the internet, is it safer to pay with a check or with a credit card?
And the answer is credit card.
The answer is a credit card.
Jill Miles, Deputy Attorney General, Derek Walker, Chief Investigator, West Virginia Attorney General's Office. Thank you both for being with us.
Thank you, Dan.
Thanks.
Thank you also for being with us. On behalf of the LawWorks, I'm Dan Ringer. Good evening. On the LawWorks webpage at thelawworks.org, you'll find a listing of recent The LawWorks program topics and additional information about this show's topic. If you would like to recommend this program to a friend, you'll find a video of the program at the LawWorks website. You'll also find free video and podcasts of previous programs on YouTube and iTunes. If you would like to suggest a topic for a future program, or if you're a school teacher and would like to receive a free copy of this show for classroom use, send us an email to thelawworks@comcast.net.
The LawWorks is produced in cooperation with the West Virginia State Bar, the Mountain State Bar, and the West Virginia University College of Law. The LawWorks is made possible by the generous support of the West Virginia State Bar, the Monongalia County Bar Association, and by a major grant from the West Virginia Bar Foundation, promoting public knowledge of the law in West Virginia. The West Virginia Bar Foundation, the philanthropic organization for West Virginia's legal profession and justice system.
From West Virginia Public Broadcasting.